Joining us now, Liz Peek. She had a barn burner column on Fox the other day blasting Joe Biden and the Democrats over these riots and looting and everything. Liz, great to have you.
Good morning. I'm happy to join you.
You're pretty fired up in your column. You want to elaborate a bit on it?
Well, look, I think this entire Joe Biden campaign, as I wrote, is an insult to the American people. The idea that Joe Biden can campaign for the highest office in the land from his basement, not engage with the press, not take any questions from serious reporters. I mean, honestly, what is their possible excuse? All the country is going back to work, going back to school, and Joe Biden is the only one who is uniquely so fragile and so vulnerable that he has to continue to hide out in his basement. Honestly, all Republicans have been sort of joking about this for the last 4 months, but the nation was expecting Joe Biden to emerge at some point and put everyone's qualms about his mental fitness, et cetera, to rest. Well, he hasn't done that. And, you just have to wonder, in campaign stop after campaign stop, which are, by the way, like 10 miles from his home, he doesn't take any questions. What's that all about? I mean, I'm on his pool press mailing list or email list, and I get these daily updates about his campaign. I mean, honestly, John, it's embarrassing. There is nothing to report because he never talks to the press. He never takes any questions from the press, etc. Okay, we all may despise the media. We are the media, you and I, to some degree. But kind of doesn't a candidate have to engage with them at some point and answer some questions? I find this bizarrely offensive, and particularly at a time right now when the country is really hurting and needs some leadership. He keeps talking about how Donald Trump isn't providing any leadership. Guess what, Joe? You don't provide leadership from your basement. It's not there. So, I mean, honestly.
Well, even yesterday, he went to Pittsburgh at a steel mill, which is really not that far from Wilmington, so he didn't really venture out that far. We talked for 20 minutes. It was all on a teleprompter. He took no questions. He left.
Yeah.
I mean,
and by the way, the press pool report on this was hilarious. He gets the airplane lands. He goes to oftentimes candidates go and then engage with the press, have conversations with them. He looks at the press, goes, "Welcome to Pittsburgh." That's it. That's the only words he uttered to them the entire day. Look, I mean, I think we all know why this is taking place. He really cannot hold on to a thread of conversation longer than about a minute without getting into trouble. Clearly, there are signs of cognitive decline. The idea that the Democrats want to foist this guy off on the American public as a credible candidate for president is laughable, and they know it. It is the reason, by the way, that his fundraising increased after he picked Kamala Harris was people thought, okay, he isn't really going to be president. Kamala Harris will be president, and we'll give money to that campaign because at least she has, she can put two sentences together in a row without embarrassing herself. John, when are people going to wake up to this? Mind you, the media here is doing everything they can to cover it up, just like they're not reporting on the riots. They're not reporting on Joe Biden's frailties. And I find the whole thing so angry-making. I don't know what to do about it. I mean, if they're not going to report on murders in the streets, they're certainly not going to report on Joe Biden being a complete flake, which is kind of where he is. And by the way, the idea might be, okay, well, Americans have seen this guy for 47 years. We don't really need to hear a lot more from him. Nothing could be further from the truth. He's been all over the place on so many issues, legalization of marijuana, the Hyde Amendment, law and order, et cetera. We kind of want to know where Joe Biden stands right now, 2020, and we're not going to find out.
Well, they're not going to let you find out because he can't tell you. That's part of the problem. But if you really break down this Pittsburgh visit yesterday, the steel mill, where he made his, I guess, law and order speech or whatever speech he made yesterday, it's really, we have to point this out, Liz Peek, and you're spot on. He gets off the plane. This is his campaign plane. Now, the way this works is you run a campaign, you get off the campaign plane, the media's there. So you engage the media immediately because that's how you get extra coverage, right?
Right.
That's how you get earned media. I want the Washington Post. I want the New York Times. I want the Pittsburgh Gazette. I want all the papers that are there, all the outlets, the radio outlets in the Pittsburgh area. I want them all there. You engage them immediately upon stepping off the plane on the tarmac. You give them 5 to 10 minutes, but you give them something. You have a little dialogue, right?
Yes.
He didn't do that.
Customary.
He said,
that's customary.
Right. Well, it's the way a campaign runs to get what is called earned media. That's media without advertising. So he doesn't do that. He says, "Welcome to Pittsburgh," leaves, goes onto his platform, makes his speech. His speech was, 18 minutes?
Yeah,
all on a
teleprompter. Yep.
All on a teleprompter, 18 minutes, takes no questions. None.
Yeah.
And then he gets back on his plane and goes back to the basement.
But
even go to Pittsburgh? Why not just do the same thing from your basement?
Because he's getting, guess what? Democrats are waking up to the fact that his polls are shrinking, and particularly in the critical battleground states now, he is effectively tied in most of those with Donald Trump, having been up several points earlier in the summer. They know it's not working. They know Americans are unhappy about the violence in our cities, and by the way, it's not one or two cities. It's like 10 now that have recurring riots and mayhem in the streets and a total lack of lawfulness. And Americans are beginning to pin that on the Democrats in charge of those cities. And by the way, they should. This is not just, because you have a Democrat mayor and so the party affiliation is somewhere evident in the city hall. These are Democrat policies that have been put in place in New York City and Washington, D.C., and Chicago and elsewhere that basically benefit the criminals. That is what's happened. In New York City, which is where I live some of the time because I'm not there now, thankfully, they have basically now changed what crimes you can be locked up for, and they've taken a lot of violent crimes off that list. So you have people burglarizing houses and assaulting people, and they're booked and they're out in hours. If criminals know they're not going to have any penalty for misbehavior, guess what? They go out and do it again. And that's what we see in New York over and over again. It is appalling to me. And how stupid that no one is willing to stand up and say, okay, this isn't working, let's change it, because our cities, John, are going to take a massive hit. Not just New York, not just Chicago. All of these cities are going to suffer major reputational degradation because people, for example, tourists, looking at where they might go for a vacation, they're going to think, well, New York City? No, I don't think so, thank you, because it's not safe. When you have a woman being raped in the middle of the day on a subway platform or another one who's stabbed at an ATM, broad daylight, this begins to bring back the 1970s, our bad times in New York. And boy, I'll tell you what, it clobbered the city's economy, and that's what's going to happen again. And it's not just New York.
Well, you're not going to open up a business, but now people are moving out. I mean, we had reports of you can't book moving vans getting you out of New York are 2 weeks booked. Like if you call up to move and you call Atlas and all the moving vans available, 2 men in a truck, it's 2 weeks before anybody can get there. They're booked 2 weeks out. People are leaving in droves, and so that eliminates the tax base. Nobody is going to want to work there, but I tell you what, you look at the video of that poor woman, the sexual assault, right? And I've been at that subway station many times.
It's right across from where my daughter lives.
That is one of the upper class areas in New York.
That's right. That's right. And actually, that I think is what's freaking people out. Most of the murders are taking place in bad neighborhoods, places where those people. I feel so sorry for the residents of our low-income neighborhoods because they're getting no help from the cops, and no help from the city's mayor. They're begging for more cops on the streets, but oh no, the progressives in charge of running the city have decided that cops are racist, so we don't want them out helping in those neighborhoods. So the crime rate and the homicide rate is through the roof. But the really scary thing for people who have the option of leaving the town is that their neighborhoods are also in play. And by the way, again, I've seen this picture before. It does not end well. It ends in bankruptcy of the city and people fleeing and a decade of recovery. And that's, I think, what we're looking at. For example, in the past 20 years, the number of tourists to New York City has doubled. Why? Because it has a reputation as the nation's safest big city, and it has a lot of attractions, right? Well, those tourists, not all from overseas, but from other cities around the country as well, supply about a quarter of the revenues for our city's restaurants. You take away those tourists, or you seriously ding those tourist counts, and those restaurants are in trouble. They're already in trouble. We have a city and a country trying to recover from COVID. All this violence is going to be a massive speed bump to that recovery. So I got to say, I am optimistic that the economy is coming back. I am not very optimistic about the city's economies coming back.
We're with Liz Peek, noted writer, Fox News, The Hill. You can follow her at Liz Peek, P-E-E-K. Can't get easier than that, at Liz Peek. Best thing to do. Liz, but look, I went to college at New York University and NYU in the early 80s. I think it was 81 to 83, and it was the same thing. This was just after the 70s. I think it was Mayor Dinkins was there, or A. Beam. I don't even remember. But it was before Koch, and the place was a shambles. And I remember I would have friends come in to visit me, and you would draw a map and tell them, these are the areas you absolutely can't go in. And they'd be like I remember saying to some friends of mine coming in from out of town, like, you can't go past 8th Avenue, you can't go 8th, 9th, or 10th, you can't go here, you can't go there, you have to stay within this area. And they'd be like, well, why can't you go there? And it would be like, because you'll not come out alive, and there's no police, and the streets are basically chaos. So you can't go past 8th, really can't go past 7th, you can't go past 8th, can't go to 10th, you'll be dead. I remember saying that. It's almost like deja vu is coming back now.
That, John,
remember
I can't tell you how many times. Yes, and I can't tell you how many times I've tried to tell my kids and other young people what can go wrong in a city. And I talk about, you remember you had to always have a $20 bill on you in case you got mugged, because muggings were so commonplace in that time. And if you didn't have any cash, that's when you could get into trouble. We used to put signs in the windows of cars saying no radio, because every night you could hear the car alarms go off as someone was stealing. This is not, and our kids' eyes would glaze over, and they just simply could not imagine it. They couldn't imagine that you couldn't go for a walk with your dog in Central Park at 11 o'clock at night because it wasn't safe. Guess what? We're back there.
And then I remember with friends, because when you live there, I didn't have a car, but a couple of friends of mine came in with a car, and we wanted to go to New Jersey, and so we'd be sitting in front of the Lincoln Tunnel, and the guys that come out with the squeegees, right? Remember that?
Basically shake you down.
You had to give them $10, or you took your life in your hands, and there were no police anywhere. I mean, this is what we experienced in New York City, and we got out of that, and now it's going back worse than ever.
So I think the question is, are the Democrats going to be able to turn this on Trump and say, all this chaos, all this rioting, et cetera, racial animus, this is all because of Donald Trump? I just don't think so. I think people are not that stupid, and they see that this really is, again, taking place in Democrat cities. The problem is, I did a quick back-of-the-envelope thing yesterday of the 7 cities that we're talking about the most, Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis, Chicago, et cetera. It's about 20% of the nation's GDP. And this is significant. And again, talk about a speed bump. If these cities get kind of mired in budget problems and have to lay off lots of city employees and this kind of thing, it's going to hurt the country. And honestly, what's incredible to me is there seems to be absolutely no will whatsoever amongst all these Democrat mayors and governors to fix anything. They're just content to let it go. How does that work?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a sick situation we're getting ourselves back into, and these cities are going to go bankrupt. I agree with you 100%. The Democrats, if you listen to Biden yesterday, one thing he said, and I picked up on this, not everybody did, But I've been saying for months that the Democrats' whole strategy here is to flood the zone with crisis after crisis after crisis, and eventually people would throw up their hands up and say, make it stop, I'll vote for Biden. Make the virus go away, let my kids get back to school, I want to have college football, I want to get back to a normal life, I want to go out to eat, I don't want riots, I don't want people breaking my windows, I don't want Molotov cocktails, make it stop, I'll vote for Biden. That's backfiring now because people are looking at what's going on. They can sit there and say Trump, but what he did yesterday, it was almost a veiled threat because he said, the reason we have this violence is because of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And it was almost like reelect him and it's going to double. It's going to triple. It's going to be worse than ever. That was almost a veiled threat that he said yesterday. That was planned because everything this guy says, they got scripted out. That was planned.
Yeah.
I think it's going to backfire.
Well, I hope so. It should. They deserve it to backfire, and he does not deserve to be president of the United States. That is an absolute certainty. And frankly, it should be embarrassing to every Democrat that this is their candidate.
I think so. Listen, great piece you did.
Thank you.
The polls all moving in the president's direction now. Everyone that I see internally, obviously, I'm on the team. I'm delegation chairman for Virginia, so I get to see a lot of these. But I can say, Liz, every single one that I'm seeing, all the crosstabs moving our way. We've got some polls where he's got upwards of 15% of the black vote, which is you look at it, you think it's a mistake, you go back, you double check it, it's there. It's an incredible movement towards Trump. He is going to win again, and the last desperation now of the Democrats is trying to blame what is happening on Trump, who has nothing to do with it. He's the guy trying to stop it. Unbelievable.
It's pretty horrifying. It's pretty horrifying. We can't let it work.
I don't think it is. Liz, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thank you for having me, John. Have a good one.